The rain in Gotham doesn't wash anything away. It just makes the grime slicker, turning the cobblestones of the Narrows into a mirror reflecting the neon sickness of the city above. I crouched on the precipice of the Wayne Enterprises gargoyle, the cape heavy with water, pulling at my shoulders like a physical manifestation of guilt. Below, the red and blue lights of the GCPD cruisers cut through the fog. They looked like bruised veins throbbing against the asphalt. "He's waiting for you," Alfred's voice crackled in my earpiece. It was dry, composed, the only anchor I had to a world that wasn't insane. "And Master Bruce, do try to keep the terrifying of the locals to a minimum. It is a Tuesday." "No promises," I said. I dropped. The free fall is the only time I feel honest. For 3 seconds, I am not Bruce Wayne, the hollow playboy, and I am not the Bat, the urban legend. I am just gravity and momentum. Then the cape caught the wind, snapping taut with a sound like a cracking whip, and I glided silently toward the crime scene. It was an alley behind the Monarch Theater. It always seems to come back to the Monarch. Jim Gordon stood by the yellow tape, lighting a cigarette with cupped hands. He looked older tonight. The lines around his eyes were deep enough to bury secrets in. He didn't flinch when I landed behind him, the impact of my boots silent against the wet concrete. "I told Bullock you'd be here," Gordon said, exhaling a plume of smoke that mingled with the steam rising from the vents. "He owes me $10. What do we have?" My voice was the gravel of the city, low and modulated. "Something nasty, even for us." Gordon lifted the tape. "Male, mid-40s. No ID, but it's not the kill that's got the boys spooked. It's what he's wearing." I stepped past him. The body was propped against the brick wall, sitting almost casually, as if waiting for a bus. But the chest. The victim's chest had been surgically opened, the ribcage spread with precision spreaders that were still in place. But the cavity wasn't empty. It was filled with gears, brass cogs, ticking springs, and a pristine ticking metronome where the heart should have been. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound was impossibly loud in the narrow alley. "Clock King?" Gordon asked, though he sounded doubtful. "Tetch? This feels too precise for Tetch." "William Togman is in Blackgate," I said, kneeling beside the body. "And Tetch deals in mind control, not biomechanics." I activated the cowl's cowl vision. The lenses shifted to the UV spectrum. The body lit up with trace evidence, but it was the mechanism that drew my focus. It wasn't just stuffed in there, it was integrated. The aorta was sutured to a brass valve. This wasn't a mutilation, it was an operation. "Look at the hands," I said. Gordon shined his flashlight. The victim's fingertips were sanded off, entirely smooth. "Professional," Gordon muttered. "Who is he?" "I don't know yet." I scanned the metronome. Engraved on the swinging pendulum, visible only with the magnification of my lenses, was a set of coordinates and a single Latin phrase. Tempus fugit, memento mori. Time flies, remember death. "Someone is sending a message, Jim." "To who?" "To anyone watching the time." Suddenly the metronome clicked loudly. The rhythm changed. It sped up. Tick, 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 tick. "Get back," I shouted. I grabbed Gordon by the trench coat and tackled him behind a dumpster just as the chest cavity detonated. It wasn't a firebomb. It was a pressure wave of shrapnel, hundreds of tiny watch gears blasting outward like buckshot. They embedded themselves in the brick, the pavement, and the police cruiser's windshield. Silence returned to the alley, save for the car alarms blaring in the distance and Gordon's heavy breathing beneath me. I stood up, pulling a brass cog out of the Kevlar weaving of my chest plate. "You okay?" Gordon wheezed, dusting off his coat. "Fine. I looked at the gear in my hand. It had a logo stamped on it. An owl. "The court," I whispered. "What?" "Nothing." I turned to the grapple gun. "I need to analyze this alloy. Keep the scene secure, Jim, and don't let anyone touch the pieces." "Where are you going?" "To find out who just declared war on Gotham's history." I fired the grapple. As I ascended into the dark, rain-swept sky, I knew this wasn't just a murder. The surgical precision, the integration of man and machine, the owl. The Court of Owls was ancient, but they had never embraced technology like this. Something had changed. The owls weren't just watching from the shadows anymore. They were evolving. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure if I could keep up. The Batcave was a cathedral of cold air and the hum of supercomputers. I stood in the center of the platform, the suit still slick with Gotham's grime, while the mechanical arms of the refit station stripped the armor plates from my body. Alfred was already there, holding a tray with a single glass of fortified water and a needle. He didn't ask how the night went. He simply looked at the brass gear I had placed on the examination table. "The alloy is an unusual composite, Master Bruce," Alfred said, his eyes narrowing behind his spectacles as he peered through a microscope. "Electrum primarily, but laced with a synthetic polymer that shouldn't exist outside of a deep-sea laboratory." "It's a refinement," I said, winching as he cleaned a shallow shrapnel wound on my shoulder. "The Court of Owls usually relies on their talons. Undead assassins kept on ice. But that body in the alley wasn't a talon. It was a civilian turned into a timepiece." I turned to the primary monitor. My cowl had uploaded the coordinates engraved on the metronome. They pointed to a defunct clock tower in old Gotham, a structure that had been condemned since the earthquake of '98. "I ran the victim's DNA through the GCPD database," I continued, tapping the keys. "His name was Arthur Penhaligon. He was a master horologist. He disappeared 3 weeks ago. No family, no friends. The perfect ghost." "A clockmaker turned into a clock," Alfred mused, his voice dropping an octave. "Poetic, in a rather ghastly fashion. But why the coordinates, sir? If the court wishes to remain in the shadows, why leave a map?" "Because it's not a map. It's an invitation." I donned a lighter, more flexible tactical suit. If I was going into a condemned clock tower, I needed speed over plating. The bat cycle roared to life, a low-frequency growl that vibrated in my marrow. I tore out of the cave, the waterfall parting like a curtain of silk, and screamed back into the heart of the storm. Old Gotham felt different. The architecture here was gothic and heavy, built by men who believed stone could buy immortality. The clock tower loomed over the district like a skeletal finger pointing at a silent god. I parked 3 blocks away and took to the rooftops. The air around the tower felt charged, humming with a frequency that made the hair on my arms stand up. I bypassed the main entrance, opting for a high-altitude window. Inside, the darkness was absolute, save for the rhythmic clack-whir of massive machinery. The entire interior of the building had been gutted and replaced. Thousands of gears, some as small as a coin, others as large as a city bus, turned in a slow, agonizing synchronicity. It was a forest of brass and steel. I landed on a catwalk. "Alfred, are you seeing this?" "Incredible," the comms crackled. "The thermal readings are off the charts, sir. That tower is generating enough kinetic energy to power a city block. But what is it doing?" I looked down into the central shaft. At the base of the machinery, suspended by silver wires, were a dozen more victims. They weren't dead. Not yet. Their chests were open, their organs being slowly replaced by the same ticking components I'd seen in the alley. They were being built. "They're making a new kind of Talon," I whispered. "Not just resurrected flesh, automatons." "How very industrial revolution of them," a voice echoed through the chamber. I spun, a batarang already in my hand. Emerging from the shadows of a massive oscillating pendulum was a figure in a tailored gray suit. He wore the white, expressionless mask of the owl, but his hands were covered in surgical latex, stained dark with blood. "The detective arrives precisely on time," the man said. He didn't sound like a cultist. He sounded like an engineer. "We found the old ways too. Unreliable, flesh rots, memory fades. But a gear never forgets its purpose." "Who are you?" I demanded, dropping into a combat stance. "I am the clockmaker," he said, spreading his arms. "And you, Batman, are the sand in my works." From the shadows above, 4 shapes dropped. They looked like talons, but their movements were jerky, punctuated by the hiss of steam and the click of ratchets. Their eyes didn't glow with the amber of the court. They were cold, ticking lenses. The first one lunged. I parried the strike, but the impact felt like hitting a moving train. My gauntlet sparked against its forearm, metal on metal. I wasn't fighting men anymore. I was fighting the clock. And for the first time in Gotham, the city wasn't just raining water. It was raining time.